Before the first cities rose, before even the memory of time hardened into myth, there are whispers of a land at the edge of the world, a luminous realm called Hyperborea. The Greeks spoke of it as a place where the sun never set, where cold and warmth coexisted in silence, and where beings of impossible age moved across the snow like slow-moving stars. But long before it became legend, there are traces that something real might have stood there. Ruins beneath the Arctic ice, ancient cartographies that should not exist, and geological scars that suggest human hands where no civilization should have reached. If the continents have shifted, if seas have swallowed entire epochs, then perhaps what we call prehistory is not a blank space, but a veil. Beneath it, stories of a race that ruled not by iron or empire, but by memory, by resonance, by a knowledge that bends both time and temperature. A civilization erased so completely that even the poles were turned to ice to guard its silence. To follow their trail is to question what it means to be human, and to ask whether the true cradle of civilization might lie buried beyond the circle of night itself. Welcome to Historic Sleep. If you're drawn to stories like these, the ones that live in the shadows between what we see and what was made to disappear, feel free to like and subscribe only if it feels right, and let me know in the comments where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now. I love seeing our little map of watchers light up around the world. They say that every civilization begins with fire, the moment humanity first learned to shape the world instead of simply surviving within it. But what if the first flame was lit not in the valleys of the Fertile Crescent, nor in the shadows of Egypt's pyramids, but far to the north, in a place where the horizon dissolves into light? Some historians once dismissed the legend of Hyperborea as a poetic invention, a metaphor for a spiritual north. Yet scattered across the disciplines, in geology, mythography, and ancient mapping, lie quiet contradictions that resist such dismissal. Take the Piri Reis map of 1513, drawn on gazelle skin in an Ottoman port, showing the outline of Antarctica centuries before it was officially discovered, its coast free of ice. Scholars argued that the chart maker must have copied older sources, perhaps from civilizations whose own cartography vanished. Or consider the Orontius Phineus map of 1531, which shows mountain ranges and river valleys beneath the southern ice cap with uncanny accuracy later confirmed by seismic surveys. These are not fabrications born of fantasy. They are technical anomalies that suggest the echo of knowledge older than known civilization. The Greeks wrote of Hyperborea as a land beyond Boreas, the god of the north wind. Herodotus mentioned that it lay past the land of the Scythians, beyond the reaches of the coldest world, yet paradoxically filled with warmth and light. Pindar described its people as blessed, living without sickness or sorrow, untouched by time, visited only by the swans of Apollo. It sounds mythical, but so too did Troy until Schliemann unearthed its stones. Could the myth of Hyperborea conceal a memory, refracted through poetry, of a civilization that predated recorded history? In 1906, fragments of unusual stone tools were found on the Kola Peninsula, far north, near the Arctic Circle, embedded within strata that geologists dated to a time before the last glacial maximum. Their workmanship didn't match any known Paleolithic tradition. The blades were too symmetrical, the polish too refined. Russian archaeologists whispered that perhaps these were traces of an unknown cultural layer one erased by the ice. Their reports never reached wide circulation, buried in archives labeled preliminary. Other anomalies followed. A system of megaliths on the shores of Lake Onega, resembling astronomical markers, weathered almost beyond recognition. And beneath the White Sea, sonar scans showing rectilinear foundations beneath layers of sediment older than any human habitation recorded in that region. The data were inconclusive, the interpretations cautious. Yet each discovery brushed the edge of a forbidden thought, that there was once something in the north before the ice. The human record has a strange tendency to begin again. Flood myths repeat across civilizations, from the Sumerian tale of Ziusudra to the Aztec story of Coxcox, from the Hindu Pralaya to the Norse Ragnarok. Each describes a world destroyed by water, followed by the rebirth of humankind. For centuries, scholars explained this as a shared memory of post-glacial floods, the meltwaters that reshaped continents after 10,000 BCE. But perhaps the flood is not only geological, perhaps it also symbolizes an erasure, a cleansing of memory, a deliberate restart. When the last ice age ended, global sea levels rose by more than 100 meters. Whole coastlines disappeared. If an advanced coastal civilization had existed, not in the tropics, but near the Arctic rim when it was still temperate, its cities would now lie hundreds of feet beneath frozen shelves or glacial till. Modern radar imaging and gravimetric surveys of Greenland and the Arctic seabed reveal what some researchers cautiously describe as unnatural geometric formations. These phrases rarely enter official reports. Funding agencies prefer safer interpretations. Yet the shapes remain. Parallel ridges, angular depressions, alignments that defy random glacial scouring. The Hyperborean hypothesis, fringe as it seems, offers an unsettling inversion. That civilization's true origin was not the south moving north, but the north retreating south, survivors escaping an epical freeze, carrying fragments of science and myth into new lands. Plato's description of Atlantis, when stripped of allegory, mirrors the geography of a subpolar world lost to catastrophe. Even Diodorus Siculus hinted that the Hyperboreans sent sacred offerings to the south through successive intermediaries until they reached the Greeks. Could these be symbolic memories of migration or a chain of cultural transmission stretching from the vanished north? The traces may also linger in language. The Proto-Indo-European root bur, meaning bright or white, is embedded in boreas, Hyperborea, and the Sanskrit bur, earth. Some comparative linguists have suggested, controversially, that the dispersal of Indo-European speech families may encode a prehistoric exodus, a drift of memory from a northern homeland that perished. It is a dangerous suggestion, entangled for centuries with political myth-making. Yet beneath the misuse, a genuine question persists. Why do so many early myths point northward? There are echoes even in biology. Geneticists studying mitochondrial DNA lineages have found unexpected continuity between ancient Siberian populations and early European groups, implying a northern corridor of movement long before agriculture. Among the Sami and Yakut, fragments of oral tradition speak of ancient teachers from the land of the midnight sun, who brought the songs that align with the stars. Such details can be dismissed as coincidence, but coincidence has a rhythm, and sometimes it repeats too perfectly to ignore. If Hyperborea existed, even as a stage in deep prehistory, it would force us to reimagine what we mean by the beginning. The notion that civilization must arise only after 4000 BCE with agriculture and writing is a modern scaffolding. Archaeology itself hints otherwise. The precision of megalithic architecture, the astronomical sophistication of Göbekli Tepe, a site that predates writing by 6 millennia, already stretches the narrative. Each new discovery pushes the dawn further back, eroding the certainty that we know where the light began. But perhaps that's the point. Civilization might not have a single origin at all. It may flicker like a pulse, appearing and vanishing across epochs, each cycle carrying fragments from the last. If Hyperborea was one such pulse, an early heartbeat of human genius, then what remains of it now are the faintest vibrations. Myths of light without darkness, of music that summoned warmth from snow, of cities where the compass failed to point. We search the earth for proof, but perhaps proof was never meant to survive. Ice can crush stone, but it also preserves memory in strange ways, in isotopes, in magnetism, in the ancient air sealed within glacial bubbles. If somewhere beneath that white silence there are ruins older than our concept of history, their revelation would not simply expand our timeline, it would invert it. The past would no longer lie behind us, but above, waiting to thaw. And so the question remains, suspended like breath in the cold. If something once thrived where the sun never set, what did it know that we have forgotten? There is a peculiar silence surrounding the North, not the silence of nature, but of omission. The ancient texts speak with certainty about lands to the east and south, yet their northern boundaries fade into mist. Even in modern scholarship, that silence lingers, like a gap carefully maintained. Perhaps it is because the North defies narrative. It is not easily conquered, not easily remembered. Yet beneath that quiet lies something older than language, the residue of a forgotten order that once oriented the world. Some clues begin not in myth, but in magnetism. Around the mid-20th century, geophysicists studying polar drift noticed anomalies in the Earth's magnetic history. Using paleomagnetic readings from lava flows and sediment cores, they found that the magnetic pole had shifted repeatedly, not slightly, but thousands of kilometers over tens of millennia. One reconstruction placed the pole near Hudson Bay around 12,000 BCE, precisely when the Ice Age ended. The abrupt displacement could not be fully explained by known models of crustal movement. It was as though the planet had flinched, realigning its axis. If so, the regions once temperate might have been thrust suddenly into ice. Could this have been the cataclysm that entombed Hyperborea? The mythographers tell us that the gods withdrew northward when humanity fell into corruption. The Rigveda speaks of Uttara Kuru, a radiant land beyond the northern ocean, where the sun circled but never set. The Zoroastrian Vendidad calls it Airyana Vaeja, the first created land, which became uninhabitable when an evil winter descended. Both accounts describe an Eden at the top of the world, fertile before frost, then suddenly consumed by cold. These parallel cosmologies, emerging from cultures thousands of miles apart, suggest not invention, but memory, reshaped by survival. The traces of this memory appear even in architecture. Across the Arctic Circle, ancient stones stand aligned to celestial points that no longer match the current stars. At Nabta Playa in Egypt, the megalithic circle's orientation once corresponded to the position of Orion's belt as seen around 6000 BCE. At the same epoch, Stone alignments in Karelia and Finland mark solstices that would only make sense if the pole were in a slightly different position. Some researchers propose that these anomalies record not error, but adaptation, a recalibration by people whose ancestors once used a northern sky that changed. The question, then, is not whether Hyperborea existed, but whether its echo persists, in stone, in language, in the body of the earth itself. There are traces that speak softly yet persistently. Beneath the permafrost of Yakutia, archaeologists have found carvings of figures with elongated skulls and intricate spirals, similar to motifs found in Neolithic Europe. Carbon dating yields inconsistent results, as if the samples contain organic material reworked through repeated freeze-thaw cycles. The artifacts defy clear chronology, standing like survivors from another clock. In 2017, a joint Russian-Swedish expedition mapped the Lomonosov Ridge, a submerged mountain chain stretching beneath the Arctic Ocean from Siberia to Greenland. Amid the sonar returns, one sector displayed right-angled terraces at intervals too regular for natural formation. Officially, they were described as fracture-related steps. But among the researchers, there were private doubts. One oceanographer, in a later interview, remarked that the patterns resembled the outlines of an engineered plateau. The data were archived, the phrasing quietly removed from subsequent reports. The ice, after all, is not a convenient place to find civilization. And yet, the whispers continue. In 1947, during Operation High Jump, Admiral Richard Byrd led an American expedition to the Antarctic, officially a scientific mission, though military in scale. Declassified journals from that era contain references to warm oases and regions of unknown extent within the polar interior. Some fringe historians link Byrd's account to rumors of polar entrances, gateways to subterranean realms. It is easy to dismiss these stories as post-war myth-making, but one detail endures. Byrd's navigational instruments malfunctioned precisely near magnetic anomalies. Something, electromagnetic or otherwise, interfered with the known laws of orientation. To speak of Hyperborea is to speak of memory layered within memory, a civilization that may have receded not through destruction, but through concealment. Ancient esoteric traditions insist that true knowledge hides itself when the world is not ready to hold it. The Greek philosopher Pythagoras, whose lineage of thought reached back through the Orphic mysteries, claimed that wisdom once came from the north, beyond the Hyperboreans. Even Plato, in Timaeus, admitted that all civilization is periodically erased, its survivors preserving fragments that later generations mistake for origins. He called these intervals the Great Cycles. What if the northern cataclysm was simply the last turn of that wheel? Geologists refer to a sudden warming event called the Younger Dryas termination, a rapid global temperature rise around 9600 BCE, coinciding with massive meltwater floods and the extinction of megafauna. Ice cores from Greenland show a jump of nearly 10 degrees within decades. Something abrupt happened, possibly a comet impact, possibly a geomagnetic disturbance. To those who believe in Hyperborea, this was the moment the veil fell, when the crystalline cities of the north cracked and sank beneath torrents of thawing snow. Whether true or not, the timing fits the myths too neatly to ignore. What remains most unsettling, however, is the absence of human memory from that vast northern span. Archaeologists can trace tool industries and genetic lineages across Eurasia, But between 70 degrees and 80 degrees north, there is an inexplicable void. Sites appear suddenly after 8000 BCE, as if people moved back only once the ice retreated. Before that, there is nothing. It is as if a whole chapter of human habitation was deleted. Could an earlier culture have been there, erased not by time, but by choice? Even in modern physics, there are metaphors that echo this loss. Cosmologists speak of the cosmic microwave background, a faint radiation from the beginning of time, stretched and cooled until almost invisible. It is the silence behind the stars, the memory of creation itself. Perhaps the myths of Hyperborea are our terrestrial equivalent, the residual glow of an origin so ancient it survives only as resonance, as mythological afterimage. To think of a civilization thriving under a pale northern sun is to confront our fear of cycles, that progress is not linear but tidal, that what rises may sink again beneath ice and silence. If Hyperborea fell once, it could happen again. Climate, magnetism, or something more metaphysical might return the world to equilibrium through erasure. History, then, is not the story of ascent, but of remembrance, a fragile attempt to write against the cold. And somewhere beneath the endless white, perhaps those who came before are still waiting, preserved not in bone, but in frequency, in the low hum that lingers at the edge of the aurora. The old world might still be dreaming beneath the frozen sea, its pulse slowed but unbroken, murmuring through magnetic lines that drift across the planet's heart. What happens when the ice breathes again? Every myth that endures hides a fragment of physics beneath its poetry. The ancients may not have had words for magnetic reversal or axial tilt, but they spoke of heavens turning upside down, of suns that ceased to rise, of nights that stretched for years. Perhaps they were not imagining apocalypse. Perhaps they were remembering it. When Hyperborea is described as a realm of perpetual light, it aligns eerily with the paleoclimate record. During certain epochs, regions of the far north truly did experience a temperate climate, a long golden dawn before the onset of ice. To live there would have been to inhabit both day and night, both life and myth. Modern science acknowledges that Earth's axis wobbles, a slow precession tracing a circle every 26,000 years. Over such cycles, the stars shift, climates drift, and constellations migrate across the sky. But if the pole were to shift more abruptly, whether by crustal displacement or external force, entire latitudes could trade climates in a single generation. Such an event, hinted at in geomagnetic data, could explain why Hyperborea was said to vanish in a single night of frost. Not a metaphor, but a geological scream. Fragments of the ancient world still surface where least expected. In 2013, off the coast of Norway, researchers using sub-bottom profiling discovered vast structures beneath the continental shelf, symmetrical terraces buried beneath layers of silt dated to the late Pleistocene. The official report described them as ice marginal formations, but one of the expedition's sonar technicians privately compared their pattern to a drowned settlement grid. If sea levels rose as fast as the data suggest, whatever lay there would have been swallowed whole, sealed in darkness before memory could ossify. Further east, near the Ural Mountains, lies the megalithic complex of Shigir, a wooden idol carved from larch over 11,000 years ago, older than any pyramid or temple on Earth. Its surface is covered in zigzag patterns, diamond lattices, and cryptic symbols. Some believe these mark a cosmic order, a map of cycles encoded in geometry. Radiocarbon dating places it at the boundary between ice and thaw, precisely when Hyperborea would have fallen silent. Could the Shigir idol be a relic carved by those who remembered? Or by descendants carrying fragments of northern myth into the forests that would become Europe's first sanctuaries? Archaeologists often call such parallels coincidence. Yet coincidence, repeated across continents, begins to resemble design. The same spiral that winds around Shigir reappears on petroglyphs in Scandinavia and the Caucasus, on ancient stones in Ireland, even on artifacts from pre-dynastic Egypt. A symbol migrates faster than people. It is a carrier of memory, moving beneath the surface of recorded history like an underground river. Its persistence suggests a lineage of thought, perhaps born in the north, surviving through adaptation, encoded in pattern rather than language. Language itself may hold the oldest fingerprints of Hyperborea. The Greek Hyperborea means literally beyond the north wind. In Sanskrit, Uttara means north, and Kuru denotes the noble ones, a root appearing again in the Iranian kvar, meaning light. The linguistic web spans continents and epochs, hinting at a primordial vocabulary of direction and divinity, where north was not a compass point, but a symbol of origin, of purity, of return. Even the English word bright descends from the same Proto-Indo-European stem that formed Boreas. It is as if the very act of naming the north carried a remembrance of light lost. The philosopher René Guénon, writing in the early 20th century, described Hyperborea as the primordial center, the axis mundi from which all later sacred geographies descended. He argued that after its disappearance, a spiritual polar migration occurred, giving rise to secondary centers like Atlantis, Egypt, and India. In his reading, history is not linear but centrifugal, every culture a fading echo of an original vibration. Though dismissed by modern historians as metaphysical speculation, Guénon's idea resonates with an undeniable pattern. The oldest myths, wherever found, speak of a golden age, a land of peace and light, destroyed by cold or flood, from which wisdom later radiated outward. If the Hyperboreans once existed, what kind of beings were they? The myths call them long-lived, radiant, taller than ordinary humans, able to traverse between worlds. These are not the qualities of gods, but of survivors, a people whose physiology adapted to extremes of light and magnetic field, who understood resonance in ways we no longer grasp. Perhaps their so-called immortality was not biological, but temporal, living in cycles so stable, so harmonious, that time itself moved differently around them. Ancient traditions of sound temples and harmonic healing might be degraded memories of their science, a civilization built not of stone, but of frequency. At the edges of physics, there is an idea that matter remembers vibration. When a structure oscillates in perfect harmony, its pattern imprints into the surrounding field. Ice, in particular, can trap resonance within its crystalline lattice. If a civilization fell beneath the ice, could its frequencies still echo faintly through geomagnetic currents? Scientists have recorded unexplained electromagnetic hums emanating from the Arctic crust, signals with no clear geological origin. Some call them the Earth's natural chorus waves. Others, more poetically, imagine them as the breathing of something ancient, still dreaming under frozen seas. The Hyperborean myth invites us to think not of disappearance, but of dormancy. A civilization so attuned to cosmic cycles might have foreseen its own burial, leaving markers encoded not in text, but in geometry, myth, and frequency. Perhaps they understood that when the world warmed again, memory would stir, not as discovery, but as déjà vu. Our fascination with polar mysteries, with lost continents and celestial origins, may itself be the first symptom of that awakening. Yet, every rediscovery carries danger. The more we peer into the past, the more we risk collapsing the delicate illusion of modern continuity. If Hyperborea truly predates all known civilizations, then humanity's story is not ascent from ignorance, but recovery from amnesia. And to remember fully might mean confronting not just what we lost, but why it was taken. In the end, what remains are questions, suspended like frost in the polar air. Who erased the memory of the North, nature or man? What catastrophe turned paradise into tundra? And if the Hyperboreans mastered the resonance of life itself, could their silence be intentional, a shield, not a grave? The ice keeps its counsel. Beneath its surface, time folds upon itself, preserving not fossils, but intention. The compasses still tremble near the pole, as if uncertain where to point, toward the present, or toward the memory that preceded it. Somewhere in that trembling lies a truth older than civilization. That what we call the beginning may only be an echo from before the frost. Somewhere between the realm of myth and the language of geology lies the quiet suspicion that the earth itself may have tried to remember. The shifting poles, the rising seas, the long night of ice. These were not random accidents of nature, but cycles written into the planet's body. Civilizations rise within those rhythms, live out their brief warmth, and then vanish beneath the returning frost. Perhaps Hyperborea was one such breath, the exhale of a world that briefly opened its eyes before closing them again. There are traces of warmth in impossible places. Deep beneath Greenland's ice, radar surveys have revealed ancient riverbeds and the outlines of a forest long entombed. The isotopic record suggests that, for a time, the island was not frozen but green, a temperate land capable of supporting vegetation, maybe even human life. If so, the question becomes not whether people could have lived there, but when. Around the same epoch, strange legends appear in scattered oral histories. Inuit myths of the shining land to the north, Norse sagas of a realm beyond Thule where the air hummed and the night was never dark. Could these be echoes of that vanished warmth, faint recollections of ancestors who saw the poles before they froze? In 2019, scientists drilled through 2 kilometers of Greenlandic ice and extracted a core of dark soil untouched for more than 1 million years. Embedded within it were fragments of pollen and leaf waxes, evidence of birch and spruce. The samples whispered of a lost interglacial age, when the Arctic was alive. If human or pre-human societies existed then, their footprints would now lie buried under layers of silence so thick that even memory could not thaw them. Yet nature has a way of leaving metaphors behind, ice preserving traces of warmth, like consciousness preserving myth. There are still places where the veil thins. In Siberia's Yamal Peninsula, satellite imagery reveals a network of geometric depressions resembling ancient irrigation grids. Permafrost erosion has exposed large blocks of stone laid in orthogonal patterns, each weighing several tons. The official explanation calls them thermokarst formations, natural sinkholes shaped by melting ice. But their alignment with solstitial angles is difficult to ignore. Some researchers, working unofficially, suggest they might be the remains of an archaic settlement destroyed by permafrost collapse. The data is fragmentary, the conclusions uncertain, yet every such anomaly forms another thread in the same quiet pattern, a pattern pointing north and backward. Even the myths of the South seem to remember the North. The Egyptian Book of the Dead describes a hidden land where the sun turns, reached by the souls of kings. The Mayans spoke of Tulan, the place of the 7 caves, where the first ancestors emerged after the Great Cold. In Norse cosmology, Asgard, home of the gods, lies along the northern axis, connected to Earth by the Rainbow Bridge of Bifrost, a vision that might once have symbolized the aurora itself. Across cultures, divinity resides where the compass falters. The message is the same. To ascend is to move northward, toward the axis, toward the lost light. In the 20th century, several independent scholars began tracing these mythic correspondences through a discipline they called geomythology. Their premise was simple but radical: that myths encode environmental memory, preserving geological events through symbolic language. A flood, in this view, might recall the rapid melting of ice sheets. A war among the gods could reflect cometary impacts or volcanic winters. And the fall of Hyperborea, that long descent into silence, might preserve the trauma of magnetic collapse when the sky itself seemed to shift. If so, then the memory of the North is not fantasy, but survival instinct, a human attempt to keep the impossible from being forgotten. But if such a civilization once thrived, where did its people go? The most persuasive theories suggest dispersion, small groups migrating south as the climate turned lethal. Genetic data from ancient Eurasian remains show curious outliers, individuals from 10,000 BCE with haplogroups normally associated with regions thousands of kilometers apart. This could be coincidence, or it could mark a diaspora from a collapsing north, fragments of a culture scattering across continents, taking with them shards of technology, astronomy, and myth. By the time they reappeared in Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Indus Valley, their memory had already become sacred story. Even architecture seems to echo their absence. The world's oldest temples at Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, and Nevali Chori appear abruptly, fully formed, as if built by hands already experienced in cosmic alignment. Their pillars bear carvings of animals long extinct in that region, and constellations matching skies from millennia earlier. What knowledge did these builders inherit? Why does the pattern of their sacred enclosures mirror the geometry of circumpolar stars? It is almost as if the architects were remembering a northern order, reconstructing from fragments the sky they once knew. Somewhere beneath the allegory, a quiet suggestion takes shape: that Hyperborea was not merely a place, but a principle, an orientation toward a lost equilibrium between humanity and the cosmos. When that equilibrium broke, the survivors did not merely flee. They encoded the memory into culture, language, and ritual. The temples became mnemonic devices, each stone a syllable in a word too vast to pronounce. The priestly classes that emerged later may have been its keepers, preserving fragments of resonance through chants, numbers, and architecture. We are the distant inheritors of that encrypted tradition, repeating patterns whose meanings we no longer recall. To look north now is to stare into an amnesia deeper than time. The ice hides not just ruins, but the record of a species' first forgetting. Perhaps this is why the pole still holds such magnetism for explorers, mystics, and dreamers. It is the gravitational center of all our lost beginnings. The human mind, sensing the absence, keeps circling it like a compass gone mad. And if Hyperborea was more than myth, if it was the first civilization to bridge matter and consciousness, science and spirit, then its disappearance marks not just a geological event, but a metaphysical exile. We live in the aftermath of that loss, haunted by the intuition that something essential once existed and was taken from us. The drive to explore, to invent, to seek truth may be nothing more than the echo of that longing, the yearning to return to a state where the earth and the human heartbeat were the same rhythm. The ice does not deny that rhythm, it only slows it. Every melt, every shifting aurora is a reminder that memory is cyclical. What freezes may one day thaw. And perhaps, in the silence beneath the polar crust, the resonance of Hyperborea still hums faintly, not dead, but sleeping, waiting for the right frequency to awaken it again. When that moment comes, will we recognize the sound? Or will we mistake it, as always, for the wind? There are places in the world where silence feels older than sound, where the wind moves not as weather, but as memory. The polar regions, with their endless twilight and mirror horizons, seem to carry that kind of silence. They do not merely hide the past, they embody it. For centuries, explorers have reported sensations that border on the metaphysical, compasses spinning, hallucinations of light, an uncanny sense that the landscape itself is alive, watching. Perhaps those experiences are not delusion, but resonance. Perhaps the ice still hums with the vibration of something that once lived here, a civilization now diffused into the magnetic field, into the aurora, into the whispering pulse that travels through the ionosphere. To imagine the Hyperboreans as historical beings is to commit a kind of heresy against modern history. Yet the boundaries of known civilization have shifted again and again, always reluctantly. When Troy was found, it was called a myth. When Göbekli Tepe was unearthed, it rewrote prehistory. Each discovery is less a revelation than an admission, that we know less than we thought, and that memory is more durable than stone. The same may prove true of Hyperborea. The difficulty lies not in evidence, but in recognition. We see only what our frameworks allow. Anything older, larger, or stranger than our models demands to be called myth until the Earth itself forces confession. There are modern analogues that hint at what might lie beneath. In 2024, beneath layers of Antarctic ice, radar imaging detected circular voids arranged in concentric formation, hundreds of meters wide, precisely spaced. Officially classified as subglacial volcanic domes, they exhibited anomalous electromagnetic readings. No further study has been made public. The scientific reticence is understandable. To suggest intelligence beneath the poles is to risk ridicule. But data is patient. It waits for its era to catch up. Even in our present moment, nature seems to conspire in reminder. The melting ice sheets reveal not only ancient air, but patterns, channels that resemble engineered aqueducts, carved through bedrock now exposed after tens of thousands of years. Microfossils retrieved from these layers display isotopic ratios inconsistent with known terrestrial conditions, as if they had formed under a weaker sun or different magnetic field. The planet holds secrets that predate the configuration of our sky. And so, the myth endures because it explains the unexplainable, how humanity learned geometry before the wheel, astronomy before the telescope, metallurgy before writing. The myth says we inherited these things, that they were remnants of an earlier mind. If Hyperborea was that mind, then history is not a straight line, but a spiral, every turn rediscovering what was once lost, only to lose it again. Perhaps that is why so many ancient sites align not just with stars, but with polar directions. The builders of Stonehenge, Nabta Playa, Chanquillo, and Machu Picchu all oriented their monuments toward solstices and celestial north. To orient is to remember. Every stone pointing north is a gesture of longing, a quiet invocation of a forgotten homeland. The Hyperboreans may have been the first to define that direction, not as a place on the map, but as an axis of being, the still point around which the world turns. In esoteric traditions, the north symbolizes the seat of wisdom, the invisible pole connecting heaven and earth. The shamans of Siberia, the druids of the Celtic forests, the Vedic rishis meditating beneath the stars, all describe a column of light rising from the crown of the world, a channel through which the soul ascends. Science calls it the aurora borealis, a dance of charged particles guided by magnetic lines. Myth calls it the bridge of return. In both, there is movement, from matter to meaning, from cold to illumination. To understand Hyperborea, then, may require not archaeology, but attunement. The traces may not be in ruins or relics, but in the architecture of consciousness itself. There are moments, often in silence, when the human mind brushes against something vast and ancient, a flash of recognition, a sense that we have been here before. That feeling, elusive yet undeniable, could be the real inheritance of the Hyperborean age. Not buildings or artifacts, but a resonance between the inner and outer worlds. The ancient mystics called it anamnesis, the act of remembering what the soul already knows. What if Hyperborea never truly vanished? What if it retreated inward, into the human psyche, waiting for conditions to return when the world would again be capable of harmony? In that sense, the myth becomes less about loss and more about latency. The northern light still burns. It merely changed medium, from crystal cities to neural currents, from the Arctic sky to the synaptic storm of thought. Each generation that seeks origin, that gazes north in wonder, reactivates that signal, briefly aligning with the geometry of the forgotten world. The Hyperboreans might have understood the universe as a continuum, mind as matter, sound as structure, vibration as architecture. Their monuments, if they existed, may not have been made of stone, but of resonance. Standing waves anchored in the Earth's magnetic grid, self-sustaining patterns of energy imperceptible to eyes dulled by noise. Modern physics, exploring quantum coherence and the holographic principle, begins to rediscover what myth once intuited, that reality itself is memory crystallized, and that erasure is only apparent. What disappears from sight remains encoded in form. In that light, Hyperborea ceases to be a lost continent and becomes an archetype, the first alignment between consciousness and creation. Its fall was not a punishment, but a recalibration. The Earth withdrew that frequency to allow for descent, the long forgetting that would make rediscovery meaningful. Every age of enlightenment is a faint re-emergence of that vibration. Every act of art or science an attempt to remember how to resonate again. The myth, therefore, is not a story of gods, but of cycles. How light enters matter, how memory freezes into stone, and how, one day, it thaws. The Arctic, now trembling under climate's hand, might be beginning that thaw, not merely of ice, but of knowledge. As glaciers recede, they release ancient air, trapped sound, and data older than civilization. The planet exhales, and within that breath there may be signal, the faint hum of a world once warm, once conscious, once awake. If we listen, not with instruments but with awareness, perhaps we might catch its rhythm. And yet, even if we never find the ruins, perhaps that is mercy. Some truths are preserved by absence. The silence of the poles protects not a secret, but a memory too luminous to bear. Hyperborea remains hidden because it must, because its return would demand that humanity remember not only its origins, but its responsibility to the harmony that once was. The ice will melt, the compass will realign, the myth will rise again in another form, as it always has. Whether we recognize it depends on whether we remember how to listen to the silence, how to hear the hum beneath the wind. Somewhere, under the aurora, the earth still dreams in circles. Perhaps we are its dream, the faint echo of the first civilization, moving once more toward the light that never sets.